Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come in and have a conversation with you today. And I really would like it to be a conversation. So I've made a bit of a guess about some of the things that you might be interested in discussing, but I'm not going to pretend to get it right. You might have some of your own personal interests that you'd like to raise. I wanted to flag right at the beginning, I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions, and don't feel confined in the questions that you need to ask. One of my personal failings is that I'm probably an oversharer, so that means that you can probably ask me anything. In fact, you can, and I will answer it. So think about anything that you might be interested in, and we'll canvass those at the end. I mean, your industry is one that I think is fascinating and at the real pointy edge of technological change and reform, and so that means that I thought you might have a bit of an interest in some of the work that we've been doing lately around the future of work. The closest, whilst I've had many jobs in my time, the closest I ever came to observing work that's similar to the field that you work in was while I was studying at university. I undertook a Bachelor of Communication Studies, and one of the papers that I remember doing required me to do a piece of analysis that I chose to do on crisis communication. And I thought, what better place to observe than the 111 call centres that operate just in Newton. And so I remember as a university student coming up and spending an evening observing one of those call centres, and just the skill set that sits behind anyone whose primary form of communication is through a headset that deals with someone either at a time of crisis or stress or agitation. I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for that work. We get snippets of that in my role, particularly our staff, our team who run our electorate office, constantly communicating with people in high states of agitation. So someone who has dealt with a call centre via a government department then calls us. So we get the aftermath of that. And so, yeah, as I say, I've had very small insights, but lots of admiration for the work that you do. It's an enormous skill. And as I say, you're also subject to rapid technological change. Now, we've been there before when it comes to rapid technological change, but the difference with this fourth industrial revolution that we're in, and you no doubt will have recognised this, is the speed. And the speed that we're experiencing this enormous change, I guess when you reflect on some of the jobs of old that we've had, you know, it wasn't that long ago that we had people pushing the buttons in elevators. Now, the speed at which we're seeing change means that in 2 decades' time, 46% of the jobs that we have in New Zealand are likely not to exist anymore. So change has always been there. Rapid change is the new part, the speed that we're having to keep up with what's going on. And it was Robert Reich who I heard talk about the speed, the dizzying speed, is something that we're having to combat. Now, I know that you'll already know that. You're in an industry where there has been rapid technological change. You're having to grapple with that. And in a way, you're probably being the benefactors of some of that change and some of that consolidation as well. But you are still in the eye of a storm. Your willingness to adapt, I think, is the thing that's going to determine those who succeed and fail in the face of rapid technological change. And the fact that part of your function and stated principles, as I've seen them anyway, are about market transitions, technology, and digitalisation of customer experience. When I see that, I think that you're probably going to cope relatively well. The group that I'm a bit more worried about in coping with this rapid technological change is government, is us. Because we are the ones that have to really make sure that we are preparing our wider workforce for everything that's about to take place. That's why in 2015, Andrew Little stood up and gave a keynote address to a business audience where he said that he wanted us to undertake a piece of work called the Future of Work Commission. Who's been watching the Nigel Latta, John Campbell series? Right. So I saw episode 1, and it's exactly the conversation that we've been trying to have for the last 2 years now, and so important because it's the discussion after the bit where you say 46% of jobs are going, and then what? What do we do to prepare? What do we do to turn this frightening statistic into an opportunity? So we decided that we wanted to develop vision, direction, policies for an economic and social program that will enable us to confidently face that rapid changing nature of work and make sure that we had sustainable and fulfilling employment. Because of course, we're the Labour Party. We're a party that was founded on making sure that we supported workers, and we could see down the track that actually our workers were facing rapid change. They were facing the chance of lots of different careers in their lifetime, potentially cobbling together a whole lot of work from different sectors, different areas, and could we give people job security in that environment? So that was a big question for us. We set up a commission that included an external reference group. We brought people from across business, union movements, ICT companies, just a whole range of people. And then we opened up for submissions. We had 500 submissions talking about the future of work across everything from education, skills, technology, partnering with Māori and iwi, sustainable development, small business, you name it, someone had a view on the future of work in that area. So we got a range of brilliant submissions. We also held public meetings across the country and asked people what they thought. And in 2016 ran a conference where we brought in Robert Reich, a guy called Guy Standing, who's done a lot of work on universal basic incomes. He was a bit of a really challenging speaker for us. Jan Owen from Australia, who works a lot on youth and youth transitions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And all of that culminated in this report, The Future of Work, which has in it over 60 recommendations that we put out there to say these are the kinds of things that we will do when we're in government to try and better prepare ourselves for those future technological challenges. Overall, though, the upshot of all of them were creating an adaptable, resilient, innovative economy. That's what we came out with. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about some of those findings. I do want to point out, though, that what we didn't do was predict exactly where the jobs would go and what would happen with precision, because it's such a guessing game. And we were concerned that if we tried to pick where innovation was going to exist, we might end up in the wrong spot and therefore be completely unprepared. Back when we were last in government, for instance, we ran a series of conferences around the knowledge wave. You might remember this lingo and terminology. And one of the things that came out from the knowledge wave was everyone suddenly cottoned on to the idea of biotechnology. This was the big buzzword that came out of the knowledge wave. And for a period after that, if you went around and visited different regional and district councils and looked at their regional economic development plans, you would see the word biotechnology in their plans. And we started saying, great, amazing, what are you doing in that space? And they'd say, oh, nothing. It's just everyone's using the word and that's where all the funding is now. So there were downsides for us picking incorrectly, perhaps, where necessarily our strengths regionally were going to lie. So for us instead, our view was that the best way to predict the future was to invent it. So in a sense, can we at least just create the environment in which we can thrive, in which we can adapt, in which we can become more resilient, and then allow some of those things to happen much more organically? What does an innovative, adaptable, sustainable environment look like, though? Well, some of that we have a role in creating at central government level. And I wanted to touch briefly on a few of those little points, what functionally that would mean for us. You know, if I ask you how you would describe the New Zealand economy currently, anyone want to suggest the buzzwords that come out? Describe the New Zealand economy, what's the first thing that comes to mind? If you're telling your friend about what New Zealand's really sustained by from overseas, what would you tell them? What was that? Dairy. Yeah, absolutely, right? Dairy, you know, and that's obviously technically true as well, dairy. But that's obviously not sustainable in terms of continuous growth in that area because of the environmental impacts that we face. You could also argue that continuing with mass intensification also knocks on to some of our other key areas, like our trading on our clean green image and our tourism. So really pushing up against each other there. Our view was that there is space for us to start pushing into areas where you don't have those environmental impacts, where we can overcome the tyranny of distance that New Zealand feels through investing in technological developments and change, and ICT in particular. That really is an area where we have the opportunity to grow. We export $6.3 billion worth of ICT products in New Zealand. Massive room for growth, but not really a focus for us currently. So our view was, if we set ourselves a target for ICT to be the second largest contributor to GDP, a little government focus on this area could make an enormous amount of change. And if you're trying to achieve a goal like that, probably what's the first thing that you try and invest in? Well, in our view, probably getting rid of the digital divide would be one of them. The fact that your access to digital technologies is not the same, or even your access to broadband is not the same throughout the country. So really basic things that we at government level could do to be evening the playing field and making sure we've got a really digital literate workforce. Teaching coding in schools, focusing on those STEM subjects in our schooling, really simple things that would all be driven if you had a target like this at central government level. It would also help give rise to the micronational business that I think New Zealand is well placed to support. Reform and grow research and development. This is an area where New Zealand really underperforms in terms of our private investment in research and development. Again, something that we can easily incentivise by, for instance, an R&D tax credit. We had one, we got rid of it, we lost business offshore when we did it. In our mind, it's a really simple way that we can try and grow our research and development and hopefully become more productive at the same time. It's one thing that New Zealand, you were listening, the OECD recently said, New Zealand, we work hard, we don't work smart. We're not a productive country, and part of it is our underinvestment in research and development. So significant areas that we can lift there. Procurement is another area where at the moment New Zealand's government is a massive purchaser of products, and yet we don't really use that to our full advantage. There are other countries where when they're tendering a contract, we'll look at the overall flow-on effect of awarding a contract to a company in terms of benefits to New Zealand, in terms of employment opportunities, for instance. That's not something that we currently factor in. We tend to just look for the lowest, the best offer, the bottom line. Perfect example was Hillside Workshops. You know, we had an example there where we needed to create rail carriages. We had someone who could produce them here in New Zealand. Instead, we went offshore. Hillside closed down. We ended up having to pay a lot of those individuals via our work and income system. It costs the taxpayer in other ways by not looking at the full ambit of a procurement. So, given that we purchase a lot, let's look at ways that we can procure in a way that's beneficial. Let's see if we can break up some of those contracts to tender perhaps with smaller companies, businesses and organisations in New Zealand that might be a better place to do it if it was carved up. One more I'll just touch on, and that's the Enterprise Investment Scheme. Particularly close to my heart, I'm the small business spokesperson. And one of the problems we've got in New Zealand is that we tend to invest in bricks and mortar. We go for safe options. Lots of good reasons for that. One's called the 1980s. And so, you know, forestry, housing, safe stuff, that's what attracts our dollar. In part because we've got incentives for people doing that as well. There's very few incentives for people to invest in the productive parts of our economy, particularly small business. Now, if you're a small business owner and you want to grow your business, you've got a couple of options. One is you leverage off your home if you own one. Increasingly, our young entrepreneurs are not going to have that option. Your second option are your friends and your third option are your family. And what do they get out of it other than risk? So one of the things that we want to do is look at things like seed enterprise investment funds, which they use overseas. It's basically, at its simplest form, you set a bit of quick criteria for the kind of businesses you want to see supported in your economy, and you give people a tax break if they invest in them. Simple. It means government doesn't pick which businesses or sectors should win. It means people do their own due diligence around what they invest in, and it opens up a whole range of funding and capital revenue streams for small businesses, which we don't already have. So there's a couple of things that we think that we can do to create an environment where we can really thrive in ways that we're not at the moment. But the thing that I'm worried about next level down from just the environment we're creating is then what the world looks like for a 15-year-old moving into this space of this rapid technological transformation. And this is something that's facing everyone globally. But in New Zealand, the thing that I'm worried about is our starting point's a bit grim. We've got 90,000 young people in New Zealand not in employment, not in education, not in training. That's increased by about 20,000 in the last couple of years. So that's a big number. That's a lot of young people. And if you add to that the fact that they're also moving into an environment where increasingly their competition in the workplace is not just from the person sitting next to them in their training program, it's someone in an entirely different country, that they're going to be forced to collaborate much more often, that they might be forced also to cobble together multiple jobs in order to make a full wage, and that they're facing an environment where those low wage, low skilled jobs are being replaced by automation. So we have to both grab that as that challenge as an opportunity and make sure at the same time that we're still meeting the kind of the desires of the millennial going into the workforce, because they are a different cohort of workers than what we've seen before. You know, some of the OECD analysis about what young people are looking for in the workplace, they want to collaborate. They're not really interested in hierarchy. They want the ability to feel meaning from the work that they do. They want to feel like it has purpose. And also, despite what this space is looking like, how fragile this space looks, and our thought that everyone wants flexible work, right? Well, yes, but they also want security still. They still want security. Jane Bryson was one of the people that spoke at our conference who talked about giving workers the ability to live lives that have reason to value, that it's to be capable humans, not just skill sets for the workplace. So how we really invest in people, make sure they feel like they're valued and invested in. So those are some of the challenges for that next cohort. And for us, probably the biggest finding of our future of work was that if we want those individuals to be able to meet the challenges of the future, our education system has to fundamentally change. And the biggest change I think we need to make to our education system is it's not a destination with an end point anymore. Education will have to become a conveyor belt that is continuous, that all of us will dip in and dip out of through the courses of our careers, particularly for that next generation who are facing upwards of 3 years before they end up working in the job that they trained for, that will face having up to 7, not different jobs, potentially different careers in their lifetime. And so for us, it's about creating an environment where we are learning for life. Now, that sounds grueling to me, because university, I hate exams. So the idea of being in an environment where we're constantly learning. But I think, again, this idea that it's just tertiary education is equally wrong. That the training that we do within the workplace, professional development, all of equal value as well. So the first thing that we thought, well, if we're learning for life, what do we do to make sure that the existing workforce who might face automation has access to retraining? 3 years free education was our answer to that. The reason we've called it 3 years free is because it's not just for school leavers. Anyone who has never gone on to do any post-secondary education, in our policy will be able to access 3 years of training, be it in a polytech, be it in a tertiary institution. My mother would be eligible for this policy for the very reason that she originally was a bookkeeper. You know, with the existence of Xero and MYOB, she's exactly the kind of person that may in her career need to retrain. And so that's the kind of thing we wanted people to be able to access the ability to do that. But that's actually the post-secondary stage. One of the concerns that we have is that when our students are in secondary school, what work are we doing to make sure that they have a plan and a path? most of us will have experienced probably some form of access to a career guidance person in high school. Sort of. I don't know if your school was anything like mine. Mine was my 7th form geography teacher. She was a lovely woman, but she had no training in careers guidance whatsoever. She told my sister that when she left school, she should go into helping rehabilitate stroke victims, a perfectly legitimate career. My sister has the bedside manner of someone with a very poor bedside manner. Like, she is not a people person at all. So this seemed to me to be the most, to give you I guess the example, she is a scientist now. She works with petri dishes, not people. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that if in high school, some of those decisions around what you're even studying impact on your ability to go into your future area of work. Students who want to go into health sciences, for instance, frequently making the mistake of focusing entirely on their physical education program and health science within school, dropping all sciences, then get onto the next stage and realise that they don't have the foundation courses they require to keep doing health science. So having someone who is professional in our schools, totally critical. Not just that, we want those individuals to be partnering with industries like yours so that they understand every sector and opportunity that exists. They're well informed about the training required, the pathways and the opportunities. So we're not just making an assumption that every student leaves school and goes on to tertiary education. Great option for lots of our students, but there are so many other great options that we don't give enough credence to, we don't amplify enough, and quite frankly, we don't put enough stock on in students' minds. We think that tertiary is just what everyone's meant to do. Actually, some of our trades pay fantastically well, totally under-resourced, and frankly, we don't give them the credit that we should. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure.
Happy for you to help us get into those secondary schools.
Yeah. But if we have a network of professionalised career guidance counsellors, that makes that much easier, because at the moment, asking some of these schools, they've got 5 hours a week. They'll have 700 students. It's a total mismatch. So our view is that we can do that a lot more easily with a professionalised network. One of the other things, though, that we want to do is make sure that at the point that someone is leaving school, because we won't necessarily get this, whiz-bang plan for every single student, but at the point that they leave, we need to make sure everyone has a plan for either earning or learning. Everyone. We've modelled what we're going to do off the back of Dale Williams from Otahonga. You might remember he was this amazing motorcycle riding mayor who decided that he wanted 0 youth unemployment in his town, and he achieved it. And I visited Dale on a lot of occasions and became completely sold on the fact that what he was doing there could easily be replicated. The simple thing he did was make sure he contacted every single school leaver, and he knew what all of them were doing. If he found that they didn't have a plan, he would contact one individual, was in charge of contacting them again and again and again. And every time would just ask, how are things going? Have you got a plan yet? Do you need any help? Now, he told me the story of one young woman who came from a family where there'd been pretty persistent unemployment. So no one in her family at that point was working. They had long history of gang affiliation. So when they called her the first time, she said, no, I'm fine, I'm not working, it's fine. Second time, same thing. Third time, she said to the person, actually, I need a bit of money. And they said, well, we can help you. There's some jobs going at the local supermarket. We can help you get ready for an interview and get you an interview set up. And so that's what they did. They worked through practice questions with her. They got her an outfit to wear for her interview. They took her to her interview. And she was the first person in years to be in full-time employment in her family as a result of that. And that wasn't the end point of their contact with her. The other thing that Dale was really hot on was apprenticeships. So my view, we totally undervalue the role of apprenticeships in our country, and yet we have such enormous needs. So it struck me that we have areas where there's lots of jobs going, but we just haven't got people with the right skill set ready to go into them. So what's happening? Well, we went and sat down with some employers and said, you're a critical part of this. People can't complete their apprenticeships or their training unless you're willing to take them on. And they said, You give all the money to the ITOs, we don't get any support, and yet in year one, these young people cost us to train. So it's a massive investment, and add to that the fact that I might end up with a 17-year-old who's just being 17, just going through life. And the moment, the support that we give those apprentices is through someone who will call them maybe every 6 months to check how they're going on their coursework, which is not that useful. And so instead what they did not wrong is they employed someone who was an apprentice support person for every apprentice in the town. And the job of that person was, if the employer was having trouble, they would just call this guy, I think his name was Jim. Jim would basically go around and sort out whatever the problem was. If their car broke down, if they'd broken up with their girlfriend, if they had trouble at home, if they were just experiencing life, because that's the age group that we're getting into these kind of critical jobs. And he was there to troubleshoot. We wanted to add an extra layer to that though and acknowledge that the costs that employers were wearing for these programs. We thought, why would we spend the dole on a young person doing sometimes pretty dud training courses when instead we could give it to an employer to take them on, to subsidise those training wages and to give them a start. So that's what we've committed to doing for apprenticeships, 9,000 paid places for a year. Employers top up their wages, but they get a subsidy to incentivise them taking these young people on. And for us, it's a no-brainer. When you've got 90,000 young people not in work, training or education, why wouldn't you use your dole money much, much more wisely? Those are the kinds of partnerships I see being really useful across industries and including in yours. And one of the wider schemes we've talked about is something called Ready to Work, where some of the young people just need an opportunity to build up skills, work ethic, get a bit of training under their belt. We want to work in partnership with employers where we pay 6 months worth of wages to give people that start. We want to make sure that they're getting something out of it as well, some training along the way. Maybe they need a driver's license too. Well, that's something that we can step in and make sure that we help them achieve. But it's just being much more open-minded about that first step. So that's called the Ready to Work scheme, and I think it will be really valuable as well. One quick other thing that I'll throw in is the skill shortage levy to fund training, particularly in areas like construction. If we see that we're continuing to have to plug a lot of gaps with overseas skills because we're not building up a workforce here, we're looking at whether or not we should place levies in for those areas so that we have a pool of funding to support training and education in those sectors. If you're not accessing skills offshore, then we wouldn't levy any industry, but that's something that we think is worthy of investigating. Ultimately, though, all of this, as I've said, is just about trying to create an environment where New Zealand is ready for the changes that are coming towards us. What I've touched on are only 2 chapters of about 6 or 7. So a lot of ideas in the future of work that have come out that I think worthy of you taking a little bit of a look. And if you have other thoughts, particularly relevant to your sector, please let us know. I'll leave the futureofwork.nz is the place where you can find everything about that. But thanks for giving me the chance to talk through some ideas. Welcome questions from you now, though. Anything that you want to talk about at all, can be completely different topic area. Fire away. I don't know what's changed along the way. Maybe it's because I came from a small town, but my experience was that, it wasn't unusual to have a job at 14. You might be packing at a supermarket, or you might be sweeping the floors. I cleaned at a gift shop. I worked at a fish and chip shop. Yeah, I do. That's the thing. I do think that has changed. And so for us, it was about how do we then plug that gap that used to exist, that used to give those opportunities to young people. That's what we were trying to do with Ready to Work. So we were looking at partnering with local councils, with the Department of Conservation, with NGOs, but frankly, I think we should be pretty open-minded about who we partner with and say, it's got to be legitimate work. We are looking for opportunities that otherwise aren't paid jobs necessarily, but it still has to feel meaningful. You don't want to demoralise a young person by putting them in a work that feels like clearly a make-work scheme. But paying them a wage for 6 months so that then straight off the bat they've got something on their CV where they can demonstrate that they've worked in a role, someone's given them experiences, written them a reference and got them started. I'd say that we probably also have that same issue with some of our sole parent workforce who might have been out of work for a period of time as caregivers. It's not necessarily that they don't have experience, but man, the number that I talk to that have taken a knock to their confidence. I've seen overseas example where they've partnered with large organisations who just actually exist as a way of bridging that confidence gap to try and get them back into the workplace. So yeah, I think it's about us being much more creative. You know, everyone will have had someone who either inspired them or they felt completely discouraged by. I mean, the impact of teachers can be phenomenal. I still think, you know, it's one of our totally undervalued sections of our society, and actually that's part of it. We've got some really specific problems with teaching in Auckland that, you know, with the wages and salaries that our teachers earn, our schools are having a really hard time recruiting and retaining teachers. And that's before you even get into some of the subject areas that we need them to specifically be in. So yes, some of it will be about trying to make it a viable option and feel like a viable option. Some of it might be, you know, bonding what we do with people's student loans, scholarships. Some of it will be about what we do to inspire our existing teaching workforce and professional development to get up to speed with some of these really rapidly changing areas. So the work that, say, Frances Valentine is doing via Mind Lab, where short courses and programs for teachers already out in the workforce, really inspirational courses that allow them to make sure that they are on top of their game as well. So some of that PD is really important, but actually we don't give teachers enough release time. We don't support them to do that professional development at the moment. So it's a big gap as well. But overall, for me, it's around how do you make a workforce, a career choice, seem exciting and valued and challenging? And that's probably a bit more of a national conversation, what we need to do. We have great ambassadors. You know, we have some people like Michelle Dickinson who are encouraging particularly women to go into engineering fields. Probably need to try and give that kind of profile to our teaching community again, because it's incredibly important. Technically, we've already committed to it. You know, the government's already committed to a full rollout. For us, it's about whether or not we prioritise the areas that we needed to prioritise first. So rural areas are still really struggling with their connectivity. So we would have liked to have seen some focus on our lower socioeconomic areas and our more isolated areas. But otherwise, it's actually investment that the government's already stumped up for and banked already. So it's there, it's just the pace of that and how successfully it's been rolled out, that we're just trying to keep them on their toes. Then there's other things around access to devices and what we're doing in our schooling to make sure that we don't have a divide between those who can afford access and those who don't. So that's something that we've spent a bit of time looking at as well. Yeah. It's amazing though, you know, you look at things like the Maina Kalane program where you've got kids who might not have been in early childhood education, and particularly they've looked at the outcomes for our Māori and Pacifica kids, where a program where they're accessing the kind of digital technology really early on in their schooling, the speed at which they've overcome the fact that they started on the back foot is massive. And I don't even think they can explain exactly why it's been so beneficial for our Māori and Pacifica kids yet. But it's that self-directed learning, that inquiry-based learning, which is so driven, you know, which you're so driven by when you're learning with those devices, versus a regimented teach-to-test, you know, approach, which unfortunately I think national standards has driven us more towards. I just think we need to move back to a, you know, play-based, inquiry-based learning where we make the most of the fact that age 7 is where our imaginations peak. Absolutely. You know, it's the last place that you should be focusing on testing our kids.
And you
so
always find that your teachers struggle to actually communicate the success of your children because it's so regimented.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yet,
no concentration on social skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet a child who comes in having not done any early childhood education, maybe with a reading age that is 3 years behind any other child, that manages to bridge that gap in a year or even a year and a half, is an amazing record of success. And yet by national standards, it wouldn't count for anything.
Yeah.
So. the reason it's 3 years as opposed to a degree is because we did want to make sure that we could fully fund and fully cost it with some certainty around the cost and impact of it. You know, we actually used to have a policy around universal student allowance, but then once we did this piece of work, we realised that one of the things we wanted to focus on was the retraining. So it wasn't just about kids coming out of high school and going into university, so we wanted it to have a slightly different focus. That's why we went 3 years free. It is absolutely affordable, but it is one of the reasons, for instance, that we didn't jump on the tax cut bandwagon, because $1.9 billion of tax cuts versus quite a bit of investment that we want to do in spaces like education and training. It's trade-offs.